hello. Buenas tardes, LEC community. My name is Delia Perez Solorzano. I am the Director of High Impact Practice for the Latinx Education Collaborative, where our mission is to increase the representation of Latinx educators K through 12. Today, we have a special guest, Sofia Gonzalez, who is an educator and activist. This is a reschedule. A lot was going on, right? Just the stuff happens. So we are here, and I am honored to be in community and in her presence today. All right, Sofia. How are you, Sofia?
How are you? We are
Oh,
excited to be here.
we are excited to be here. It's been a whirlwind of a week, personally, and I mean, just the stuff that's happening right now, right? It's really heavy on our hearts as educators. We're smiling. We're here because we're in community, and I love you. I've enjoyed our spirits together. We vibe. But yeah, I think on the insides we're hurting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I really think that this is a timely conversation that we're going to be having. And I know we had some original thoughts and ideas, but if we have to interrupt our regularly scheduled program to really address the state of education right now and how it's under siege and under fire, and how we are definitely in crisis and we need immediate mediation, solutions, action steps, healing, and transformation, like not tomorrow, yesterday, right?
right, right. Well, bring us in community. Start off by, telling us about yourself, where you're from, where your people are from, who are your people, and what do you enjoy doing?
Sure, absolutely. So, obviously, my name is Sofia Gonzalez, and I am a proud Mexican. My mother is from San Sebastian, and my father is from Monterrey, Mexico. And so I have a very interesting mix. I like to say I'm half tortilla and half tostone. And I am just really proud of my culture and where I come from. And I definitely have a lot to say about that because as of late, I've been on quest to really identify my roots and who I am and where I come from and where my ancestors are from, and how to really access that power and access that grace and that just critical hope that I'll end up talking about later because of the storytellers fellowships that I'm in collaboration with LEC and Storytellers for Change. That critical hope component is so important for us as storytellers. Um, but I digress. I'm from the Chicagoland area. I was born in the city of Chicago, lived there for many years, then just kind of moved on the outskirts, did some work there. And I'm probably about, I don't know, maybe about 5 minutes west of the city of Chicago. And so, man, I really bleed deep for my Chi-Town folks, and I'm just excited to be in this space. I've been in the field of education for 13 years right now, and I'm on a bit of a journey. And I am on quest to really revolutionize not only the spaces that I'm in, but the spaces that I long to be in. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I'll just pause right there. I'll pause right there.
Well, we relate on so many levels. I am Puerto Rican and Mexican too. My father is from Michoacan and my mother's from Naguabo, Puerto Rico. So hey,
Hey,
did you know
hey.
I made up my name? Like it's on my Instagram. Shiboricana is like Chicana and Boricua mixed together.
Okay, now.
I made up that label. People are into labels: Latino, Hispanic, Latinx. I'm like, I'm Shiboricana. I was in college, so. What else did you say? Chicago, yeah, Logan Square. What part of Chicago did you grow up in?
So I was born in the Humble Park area, so right around Division in California, and then I
Mm-hmm.
moved out for many years, and then I got married back in right around North Avenue and Pulaski,
Oh,
um,
yes.
just a couple miles west of the downtown area. But um,
And where'd you go to high school?
sure. So I went to high school on the outskirts. So I went to high
Okay.
school in a suburb called Franklin Park.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so,
Cool.
yeah, so I've bounced around. So I have quite a vantage point from the city and the suburbs and kind of nestling between the tension of both.
Oh, yes. But you know, Berwyn, Cicero, I mean, it's still a city. Like it's bordered right there. And the demographics are heavy, heavy Latino, more like leaning towards Mexican. At least that's what I remember before I left.
Absolutely. Suburban, urban, Berwyn Cicero areas, predominantly Latino, specifically Mexican community. Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, that's so dope. Like we're connected. We're all interconnected, right?
Yeah,
Somehow.
absolutely.
Yes. And wow, what I share this often with students, friends, like any opportunity I get because I don't know if this happens to you, but it's moving to Kansas City. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're Mexican." I'm like, "And Puerto Rican." Like my Puerto Rican flag, my Puerto Rican
Right.
ness, just was like feeling left out. And
Absolutely.
so I did such a good job at that, Sophia, that so many people in Kansas City think I'm only Puerto Rican.
They're like, wait a minute. She's just straight up.
I'm like,
This is all that we're
I'm like,
getting. This is the vibe.
I know. And then I'm like, wait, my Mexican side is, and that whole ni de aquí ni de allá concept of Esmeralda Santiago, I'm sure you could relate to, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure we could share stories about I go to Mexico, I'm not Mexican enough. I go to Puerto Rico, I sound Mexican. I'm in Chicago, and it's just a torn identity. But we're beautiful people, Sophia.
Absolutely.
We're multidimensional, let's call it. Tell us a little bit about your leadership story. You could weave in your upbringing, anything that helped shape who you are today or where you're at today. Who can you credit? All that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question. Man, my professional journey has taken so many like dips and dives, but it has been something that has really shaped who I am today. And so, man, just right at the onset, I was really involved in like youth leadership and like youth programs, like way back when I was a teenager, just volunteering at the local church and building up young leaders and growing as a young leader, really understanding like the dynamics of like faith development and character development and leading small groups and doing book studies and things of that nature. So right away, things were kind of like ingrained in me, this idea of like being a motivator, someone to influence and inspire. And I always felt comfortable being in front of a crowd, whether it was a small crowd, a large crowd. Like I was like, give me more. I love it. Not that I was so into myself, but I felt this energy and this reciprocity. And, it's like you find your element. And I really found it early on, speaking and teaching and all of those different dynamics. I was a poet right away. And so poetry and writing kind of had its space in my life as a mode of communication. So that was something that was constant for me, just writing a lot of poetry. And, spoken word then became like another sphere of the way that I would express myself. And that really opened up some stages for me to really share some of the messages of my heart, really at an early age and then even into my adulthood. And and so with that, I kind of pivoted into nonprofit work. So there I was in my early 20s, hanging out in the nonprofit sector. I was with an after school program nestled within the heart of the city of Chicago. And I was working with what were called at-risk youth, right? And so I ran a tutoring program after school for them, and they were bused over to our site and helped them out with some homework. And then again, right, trying to lead them, trying to influence them, really trying to help them out and really just trying to elevate who they were as young people. And that's kind of like where I got my feet wet in the professional world. And then I transitioned into another nonprofit by the name of Caris that really then thrusted me into the classroom as a guest speaker. So in my 20s, I was a guest speaker for schools all over the place, from the city to the suburbs. Then I even started traveling the country once I got married. And we had like this whole platform where we were talking about marriage and dating and relationships. And it was there that I really felt, Delia, a call to the classroom. Right. Because once I got into the classroom and once I was in front of the students and once I was in front of like a dry erase board, I'm like, yo, I feel this. Like there's something sacred about me being in this space. There's something sacred and unique and specific to my calling. Once I get in front of young people, once they start vibing with me and once I start vibing with them. And that's when I knew, I'm like, man, I think I want to go into the classroom and I think I want to go full time. And with that being said, I thought about my whole school journey and I realized that I never saw teachers that looked like me. And I know that that's a familiar story, right? And why are we still having it in the year 2022 is beyond me. So we could talk teacher representation in a minute. We already know LEC
Mhm.
is a clarion call for that. And that's why nosotros somos familia. And I feel very comfortable in this space with y'all. I feel like, man, you are such a powerful force in KC and across the US. And you guys are just on fire. But I digress, right? And
Well,
that,
wait. Your friend Anastasia Delgado is saying
yes,
free. So I guess keep it going.
yes, that's one of my girls from the Storyteller Expression Fellowship. Um,
Hmm.
and she's an incredible storyteller. So hey girl, hey.
She's
Um,
amazing. She's a middle school teacher out here in KCK.
yes,
And
yes.
same thing, same thing. We connected and like we're cousins. Like,
Yeah, like we're family. And so, that's something that also motivated me and moved me, right? I didn't have a teacher that looked like me until I became one. How about
mm,
that? And I remember I was really moved by my first teacher of color. He was a black professor, and he taught writing. And I remember him just really speaking to me as a young writer. And I remember his feedback, even to this day, that I was poetic, that I had a literary voice that was charming, that was passionate, that was innovative. And so it was all of these pieces, right? That really moved me into the classroom. So I entered the classroom pretty later on in life at 30 years old. But I credit a few people. So first and foremost, I don't know if my mama's on. She's usually on when I'm on the podcast, but she might have to hear it later on because she's actually at the store trying to buy stuff for her first graders. I credit my mother, who is a champion for, she's a lifelong learner and she retired. Okay, let me just say this. She retired a few years ago, many years ago at that. And she came back into the workforce. And guess what she became? A first grade dual language.
what? No
Yes,
way.
yes. She
That's
is,
amazing.
yes. She got endorsed and now she's going back for her second or third master. She's getting endorsed for English as a second language. And she is just so passionate about students. And I love what the Secretary of Ed is calling our ELL learners now. They're multilingual learners, right? So
Hmm.
let's talk from a an asset framework versus a deficit mindset. See, to
Yes.
have two languages in your mind working at the same time, that's not a deficit. That's actually an
Mm.
asset. So, with that being said, mom has been such an inspiration to me. She is like my soundboard after every
Mhm.
interview, after every opportunity. I'm like, Mom, here's what's going on. And she's like, Mija, you got this. You got this.
Mhm.
Just get in the room. Just get in
Yes.
the room and just share your heart and just let them feel your passion. They won't forget you. You're very
Yeah.
unforgettable. You are unforgettable. So don't worry about it. So if I'm going to credit anybody in this space right now, I definitely want to elevate and hold space for my mom, who has been such a champion for my work. She travels and hears me speak if she's able to, and she's back in the classroom. So now we're two teachers that are like
Yes.
back and forth talking education, just talking about the Latino community, and just really wanting to just get in those spaces and amplify our students and lift the Latino voice. And she came out of retirement to do it. So, I mean, is she
Wow.
or what? I mean, they call me Miss G in the classroom, but my mom's a real G. She did not have,
Yes. She's Mrs. OG.
she is Mrs. OG
Awesome.
double G. Okay.
Yes.
Let me just say that. So, so I'll stop there, but that's kind of like a little bit of my journey.
Well, you're going to tell us some more, but definitely let's elevate your mom. And, you got me thinking about your own school journey and that lack of representation. I want to elevate Calvin Park High School in Chicago, and I'm going to have to time frame it 1994 to 1998. We had a lot of representation. So, Dr. Diana Escoitia, if you are listening, thank you. Thank you for answering that calling to lead. She was our high school principal.
Wow.
We had Julia Alvarez as her assistant, Dr. Collazo as the other assistant principal, who's Maralisa's uncle, right? Small world. And yes, and you started in youth leadership, and then you were guest speaking. You said you called it charis.
Which means
And
grace in the Greek.
Say it again.
Charis means grace in Greek.
Nice. And so you reminded me of something else when you started talking about guest speaking and I guess talking about marriage and relationships. Everett Gutierrez was a classmate of mine at Calvin Park High School, and I think I saw your name.
Oh, yeah.
As a presenter, a speaker for his Chosen conference.
I have done some work with Everett. Absolutely. Small world, small circle.
Small world.
And Mr. G, my esposo, graduated from Calvin Park.
Wow. See, okay, what year? Well, I was 94 to 98, and your guys are younger than me. What year?
Let's see. He was class of 95.
Okay, so I was a sophomore-ish, probably. No, I was a freshman.
Okay.
So 94 to 95, I was a freshman. Yeah, probably doesn't remember me. Wow. And kudos to your mom. My Lord.
Mamá,
that's beautiful.
Ella, mi inspiración. I mean,
yes.
Real.
Here goes another expresión and LEC Reved. And I mean, Ivan's all over. Saludos. You are amazing and so inspiring. Palante, prima. Oh, he knows. He knows palante.
Yes, Ivan. We anointed one another as cousins in one of our fellowship sessions because I'm like, look, Ivan, you're like my primo. Like, let's just let it out. Let's just make it plain.
Okay,
Ivan's my guy. What's up? What's up? I'm so
glad.
Please.
I won't mute you. I won't be jealous. I might or might not be jealous because he might or might not be one of my favorite colleagues. So let's move on. Okay.
No, we can share. Vamos a compartir.
Well, he's my primo hermano, right?
Okay. All right.
Let's switch it up a little bit. Let's switch some gears. What have been some hurdles in your career that have made following your dream to teaching? Because you started in youth leadership and guest speaking, and then you went into the classroom. But what are, I mean, you talked about that transition as if it were lightly, right? You're like, I did this and then that. But what were some hurdles that made your dream journey a little more difficult?
Sure, absolutely. And what I'm about to unpack, it's like if we could even put trigger warning on some kind of caption, because
I got you. Just
right.
Give me a minute.
So the challenges were definitely intense, and some of them were permanent. But I feel like this is a really important conversation to have. And I don't think, and I've been in a lot of spaces, I don't think that we're having it enough.
Mm.
Once I got into the classroom, and many who have followed my story know my starting point. You know, I started in Pilsen Little Village, which is nestled in a pretty gang infested neighborhood where I was at and where I was stationed. And my first 5 years of teaching were pretty much a baptism by fire, right?
Mm.
I was just confronted with a lot of societal issues that my students were facing. Now, mind you, the students that I had at that particular time were students who were either kicked out or dropped out of the Chicago public school system. So I was with the Second Chance Charter for kids who had 1 credit, 2 credits, no credits. And they were literally trying to graduate. But the problem was that they had way too many barriers that were on top of them that were preventing any type of upward mobility at all. And I was confronted with issues that I was not trained to confront, to circumnavigate. But being the individual that I am, that is full of compassion and empathy and heart, it was very difficult for me to not be enthralled in the situations and in the circumstances of my students. And so right away, I was confronted with just how horrific gang violence was and how it was very difficult to penetrate, and how, man, I even started doing work with the Chicago Police Department. I was doing work with Ceasefire. I was conducting peace circles with my students. And you know, when I lost my first student, Delia, in 2012, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And my first funeral is etched in my brain forever. I mean, these are experiences that it's just really hard to, you know, to move past. And I'll never forget that first student funeral of my student that unfortunately died of gun violence. He was at a block party, and they shot him, and he was dead on arrival. He was only 17 years old. And I, you know, I ran into his mother outside of the Catholic Church, and I said, you know, in the name of your son, I really want to do something about this with my classroom, you know, with these hands and with this heart. And I feel like up to this point, Delia, I have not broken my promise. But the work continued, and it came with a price. I mean, we're talking visiting them in the ICU. I mean, you know, seeing them with bullet holes, them coming back like they're wounded animals. That's how I felt like they were treated. And I developed vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, post traumatic stress disorder, uh, tons of compassion fatigue. And I really had to make a decision, like, do I want to stay in the field of education? And this is what I want to normalize. I want to normalize teacher trauma. I want to normalize the fact that for us as teachers that take on hard teaching assignments, and we are expected to move mountains with very little resources and a plethora of issues and challenges and barriers. Where does the healing take place? When does an educator who is in the trenches, like a first responder, and we could talk about Texas in just a minute, that's a whole other ball of wax. But when we talk about this, why is it just band-aided with a little bit of self-care and a little bit of mental health? I am looking to amplify this dynamic. And if we want to talk about retaining teachers, specifically teachers of color, who more often than not take on these tough teaching assignments in very high need districts, how are we going to nourish them after the fact? And I want to say, and I just want to amplify the work of LEC. Your recent healing circle with Mara was very transformative, and we don't see that enough. So there's so much to say, and I'm going to try to stay on track with your questions because they're very loaded. But that was one challenge, right? Dealing with my students dying on me, dealing with my students losing them to jail and looking for them and finding their mugshots. How about this, Delia? How about dealing with undercover cops coming into your class last period and they're yanking your students from their chairs because they were allegedly part of a murder scene the night before, girls and guys. We don't make this up. I don't make this up. And I'm supposed to help them graduate. Well, we need to address, there's such an intersectionality of so many social issues that our kids are facing, that graduation is just one piece. What about fair access to affordable health care? What about fair access to a lawyer? What about fair access to quality jobs? What about quality, just a place to stay that isn't just going to cause them harm as soon as they walk outside? I mean, there's so many different dynamics, right? From food insecurity to poverty to lack of access to healthcare. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. So you want to talk about what challenges that I face? Those are just some, and I am not even scratching the surface. And as a survivor of PTSD, and yet having the sphere of influence that I have, I definitely, and we'll talk about this too, and I'll be going to DC this summer in a really cool fellowship, engaging policy and practice, school safety and teacher trauma. I don't know what congressman I need to speak to. I don't know who I'm going to meet on the streets of the Capitol and in my cohort.
Yes.
But they better get ready for Mrs. G, because you know what? No, this is not working. This is not working for us. This is not working for our school staff. And this is definitely not working for our nation's kids. And they are going to hear the narratives. They are going to hear in their authentic truth exactly how it happened. And that's what I'm learning as a storyteller. I'm going to tell the damn truth in the order and in the manner that it happened. And whoever I scandalize, good, be scandalized. Scandalized, because we are the first responders. We are in the trenches and we are being exposed to psychological, emotional, and mental warfare. And right now, we are all under siege, and somebody needs to listen, and somebody needs to listen now. So those are just some of the challenges that I faced early on in my career. And I'm not even talking about the sexism that I experienced. I'm not even talking about, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking about the microaggressions. Listen, let me just drop one truth here and then we could pivot, Delia. When I was in the same charter, the reading deficits were so low and I was vibing and impacting the kids so deeply and so greatly that they offered me a paid master's to go and get my reading instruction certification. And I was on my way to be a literacy coach, right? And just really working with the deficits and like the reading scores and just our struggling readers. I mean, it was so devastational, Delia, that our kids were coming in like at a third and fourth grade reading level, and they were teenagers. They were 16, 17, 18, and 19 years old and reading at a fifth grade level, reading at a sixth grade level. That's not even my point. This is my point. While I was in my graduate program and I was working on being a literacy coach, mind you, I was a rookie. This is just like 3 years in, and they had already given me like teacher of the year. They gave me this sponsored master's program because I was so involved in the work. I was so involved in the work, raising money for their loved ones' funerals, like doing all the work that I was mentioning, visiting them in the ICU, attending their funerals, really working and just trying to get content that they would like dig and vibe with. And just, I mean, I was really just giving my heart and my soul. And I remember one white male colleague came up to me, like in the middle of the hallway. We were just kind of chatting, and there were a lot of students there. And I'll never forget, he was talking, and then all of a sudden, his tone changed, and he got on his knees, and he said, "I just want to tell you this. This is how much literacy you're bringing to the campus." And he got on his knees. Mind you, I also want to say that he was very tall and intimidating in stature. He probably was like 6'5", over 200 pounds. I'm only 5'1", okay? I'm tiny. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how I felt. And these are some of the things that like we're afraid to talk about because, man, we might not be in good standing with our colleagues. We might lose our job or we might be frowned upon. No. At this point, I don't even care who hears it. That was racist. That was sexist. That was him hating on me so hard that he had to get on his knees and make me feel like I was inferior. And I reported his behind. And after I reported his behind, I approached him and I just like went off on him. And here's one last challenge with that. There was no support for teachers of color in the children that were working with kids that had so many needs, that were literally so deep down in the margins. And I was so underpaid, riddled with post-traumatic stress disorder, praying and hoping that another kid of mine would not be shot and killed before the end of the school year. And then dealing with this racist microaggression, implicit bias atmosphere as a Latina and as a woman, that intersectionality. Those were some of the challenges that I faced early on.
Wow. I could definitely sit with a lot of what you're sharing. But before I comment, there's definitely some love in the chat. Is it the chat, the feed? Anastasia sending you love and strength. My life coach, Maralis, is saying normalize not the trauma, but the healing. And I'll go ahead and throw in a plug. Come back July 12th. Maralis is actually going to have another session with us, and it's going to be transformation and healing. So definitely, and she's encouraging you to speak that truth, and she's doing that 100. And here she goes again. And yet so threatened by your magic or by our magic. Yes. Gosh, that happens often. And power. Absolutely. Anastasia's telling you, speak on, sis. So definitely continue to speak your truth in this space. This is a safe and brave space that we have for you, Sofia. We want to elevate your story, and I like let's normalize the healing, right, of that trauma, and those expectations of, I don't know about you, but I felt oftentimes in the classroom like I had to be this very strong-willed person, and it almost felt like, and again, this is our perception, but it's my truth, it's my experience, it's our lived experience as educators. So it just felt like we were weak if we didn't, break up fights, right? Or see, daily fights sometimes it felt like, and sometimes I think the toughest day was 13 fights in one day. And
wow,
it's just, oh my God. Here's Maralise one more time before we move on to that next question. She says, not that I'm threatened, I'm a fan. I was talking about the white male teacher. Yes. They try to bury us not knowing we're seeds. Oof.
Ooh, love that. Love that.
That's
Thank you.
beautiful. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. And I definitely co-sign on the normalization of healing.
Yes.
And with that being said, normalizing talking about the trauma that should lead to healing.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. What keeps you going, Sofia?
It's in like 3 C's. I'm a English teacher and a poet, so alliteration is kind of my jam. I'll say this: the call, the crew, and the cross. I'll unpack that. What keeps me going is the call, right? First and foremost, obviously, I spoke to you all about a lot of my pain and a lot of the challenges that I've gone through. But with that being said, it really takes a very conscious individual to turn pain into purpose and to turn disappointment into destiny. And that's exactly what I did with the help and with the support of those that were in my circle. And as a result, I have experienced, a lot of favor, a lot of grace, a lot of opportunity. a lot of multiple seats at the table. Man, and to me, that is such a recompense for just the work that has been done and the work that I will forever be proud of. It was dirty, it was messy, but it was also brilliant. It was also illuminant, and it was also just, I mean, wow, it's just, it really takes your breath away doing this kind of work and doing it with all of your heart. So the call keeps me going. I know that I have a calling on my life. I know that I have a civic and social responsibility. I know that with the narratives and with the experiences that I have gone through, I know that I have to be a truth teller. I know that I have to advocate both at the state and eventually at the federal level. I don't know exactly how my career path is going to transpire. It will take a lot for me to get yanked out of the classroom because that's really my element. And I just love being in a space and a place where I get to be with students and be with them every day and share content that is culturally sensitive and responsive and amplifying just the diversity in front of me and really focusing on themes like justice and um, global competency and being a social activist and a change agent, all of these different pieces. But I think that there's going to be a bit of a pivot. We'll see when I get to Washington, D.C. this summer, what that's going to look like. But I know that I have a calling on my life, and it's, both a burden and a blessing. And I'm learning how to pause, and I'm learning how to, really heal along the way and really amplifying those best practices that will help me. So the call to really just announce as a clarion call equal education opportunity and really just changing the narrative. I think the calling for me right now is to change the narrative. Yes, our nation's kids, specifically those that are historically minoritized, are often left on the margins. And yes, many of our nation's kids are learning while behind, but that doesn't mean that they have more deficits than assets. They're actually more resilient. They're actually resourceful. They actually can do a lot with a little. The temperature doesn't have to be perfect for them to thrive. And these are assets that I really want to amplify in reference to our nation's kids and specifically the student populations that we are working with. And so that really keeps me going. Just the fact that I have a calling on my life. And then the crew, right? Y'all need to get a crew. Y'all need to find your squad. Y'all need to find your community. If there's anything, Delia, that I have been learning in the past couple of years, COVID has really done some things for some folks and really given us an opportunity to pause and to reassess and to reevaluate and really dig deep within ourselves to see who we really are and where we want to go. So a lot of self-realization, but that cannot really and truly flourish without community, right? And without a crew around you. So I've been on hot pursuit. People are like, why are you in 50,000 fellowships? Because I need community. That's why. Because I ain't doing this by myself. Okay. So I'm going to get into the room with like-minded so we can share that energy, so we could share that desire for social change, for social justice, for equity in our schools. And I am going to be among them and them among me. So my crew, some of my best friends, they are all teachers. And obviously, I'm admitting my bias, right? But we kind of draw near to each other. And so, I have some incredible friends and family and now like fellowship networks that I'm just so grateful for, that pour into me, that believe in me, that see me, right? And that really give me an opportunity to share all of my gifts and to share my heart and my narrative. And I'm just so grateful. So the call, the crew, and then last but not least, the cross. I am a woman of faith. And so that, that has really motivated me throughout the years. I am really moved at the intersection of biblical justice and social justice, right? There are a lot of biblical principles that really lend itself to social activism and community action, like giving a voice to the voiceless and doing justice and loving mercy. One of my favorite scriptures is, blessed are those who maintain justice, who constantly do what is right. That's Psalms 106, verse 3. And so, really moved by those biblical principles of really doing what is just and what is right, and really standing up for those that need that amplification. And so that's what keeps me going, right? In a nutshell, the
I
call
love it.
and the cross.
The call, the crew, and the cross. The crew, without an inner circle, I think we were built, I thrive in community, but I know why now. As Latinos, right, and our indigenous practices and our ancestors, like, we used to be in collective, right?
Yeah.
In collaboration constantly. And that call, oh, how many times do some folks try to run from the call? I know I have. I tried to run away from teaching. I always told my students, if you would have told me when I was in high school that I was going to be a high school teacher, I would have thought you were nuts, right? And I noticed kids like preteens and teens would just magnet to me. And I'd be like, what do you want? When I was about 19 years old, 20 years old. And I was a late bloomer to the classroom as well. So I was 24 when I was an aide, and 30 when I was officially a classroom teacher. So, but yeah, that call, they call you in. And I like how you said it's a civic and a social responsibility. I don't know if Maralise is still in, but I remember, because sometimes that call can pull you into say, well, I'm a servant. And she opened my eyes at one point. I think she mentioned there's a difference between servant and service. I don't know if she's listening. Maybe she could tune in and drop her golden nugs. Wow. So as we wrap up, I have two more questions.
Sure.
The next one is about Latinx educators and like sustainability or retainment, right, of Latinx educators. There she goes. It's service versus servitude. Thanks. Latinx educators are the fastest growing demographic of educators in the country. Unfortunately, they are also some of the quickest to leave, with 3 years being the average amount spent in the classroom.
Yeah.
Compared to the national average of 5. Why does Sofia think this is? And what advice would you have for other Latinx educators or aspiring educators that are listening or struggling right now?
Yeah, that's a real layered question. And man, people write entire dissertations on teacher representation and what that looks like in our school systems. But just a couple of things that kind of come to mind. First and foremost, right? Many Latinx educators like myself don't see other Latinx educators growing up. And so, number one, why would we want to return to a space where there's very little representation and there's very little connection and community in that sense, right? And number two, and I had mentioned this a while back in our conversation, but this idea of just a lack of support, right, that are specific to the Latinx educator, to teachers of color. There are cultural challenges that we uniquely face that oftentimes we don't receive the necessary support at the building level and oftentimes at the state level. And so that's another challenge, right? And quite frankly, there is, such a chasm still between what educators are getting paid and what they're worth, right? And so we just have so many challenges. We have so much work to do. I personally joined a team, a startup called Edifying Teachers, and I'm their mentor. Director right now, and I'm doing some consulting work with them. And the whole goal of Edifying Teachers is to create a system of support for teachers of color so that we could keep them in the profession by giving them culturally responsive frameworks where they can see, okay, listen, because for me, it's not just about best practices. We all get that. We all get that kind of training. We all understand. We teach to the whole child. We all understand we have to be engaging. We have to do classroom management in a certain way. We get that. But what about some of the experiences that I mentioned earlier, like those microaggressions, those implicit biases, just straight up racist comments and remarks, being one of the only ones in your grade level.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the only Latina in my grade level for junior AP, and
Mm.
we're in a building where it's close to 100% Latino. That's problematic. And obviously, we could all teach to whatever culture, but it goes without saying, and the research is clear. Man, there are academic gains, there are social gains, there are psychological gains when students see teachers in front of them that resemble them, mirrors and windows. And so
Mhm.
these are just some of the many challenges that I'm seeing in terms of the Latinx educator. 26% of our nation's kids are Latinx, and only 9% of our nation's teachers are. And let's not even talk about the Black educator, too. 2%,
Mhm.
a dismal 2%. This is problematic because we
Mhm.
have a very diverse student population, and specifically to the Latino population. We're the fastest growing population in the United States. So if you invest in the Latino population and the Latinx educator, you are investing in the prosperity of our nation and our democracy. I'll keep going with
Mhm.
that, but
I know.
I'll just nestle that right there.
Oh, I felt that one. Yes. No, I just had a conversation with an educator today, and we both agreed, like, all students benefit
All
from
students,
having a Latinx educator, or educators of color. Period. A
period,
BIPOC teacher. Yes,
period.
they need to see diversity, and especially, I mean, of course, the Latinx education, like we center and we focus on Latinx impact, right? And students do need to see themselves, especially in spaces like where you're at. I mean, I elevated Kelvin Park, but that was Kelvin Park in 94 to 98. It doesn't necessarily resemble that now,
Right.
right? And also the KC area where we're at, it was like 8 of us in a building where the Latino demographic is over 63%. And I'm talking educators, like teachers. If I count ESL paras and like front office and kitchen and custodial staff, then it goes up a little more. But teachers, classroom teachers,
That's
they only saw 8 of them in a classroom of, I mean, sorry, in a school building of 88 teachers, and zero principals that were Latinos in a school building where 63% Latino.
Yeah, and that's why we need to be more solution based, right? We need to incentivize, teachers of color coming into the teaching profession. We need to go pursue them instead of waiting for them. I put pressure
Mhm.
on my school leadership. I'm like, who are we hiring? Like, what's happening? And
And there's so much that needs to go in with it too, like mentoring, take
absolutely,
risks, like take a risk on us like you do others, right?
right.
Like allow for growth. Like I'm really big on just PD, like help us
Yes,
grow.
yes,
They're really quick to elevate the white male all through, from the classroom to coaching to principalship to director of programs to assistant superintendent,
right,
real quick,
right.
and provide all the supports. But we also need PD and support and mentoring. But we'll talk backstage about that one.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
um, I know you want to share a video, and we're going to do our best. Like, we're going to attempt, but I do want to ask you that last question because I think
Sure.
it goes with it. If you had one thing that you wanted all your students to walk away from your class, your school, all the different hats that you wear, knowing or learning, what would that be?
Whew, I want to say a lot of things, but I definitely want them to
Oh,
know.
let me tell you, and then I'll share your video, and I'm hoping we can share it. If we could keep this under the 60-minute mark, this will be shown on Instagram. I know you're big on Instagram, so that's why I'm telling you.
Hey,
So, all right, go.
ready, set, go. Yes. So this idea of wanting every student that comes into my classroom to know that they are seen and that their cultural identity and landscape matters to me, and that I want them to be their full and true authentic selves. I also want them to know that I'm a guide on the side and that they are in control of their learning. I also want them to know that they have all the assets, the skills, and the ability, if only they would have the audacity to think and to know that they can be the change that they wish to see in the world. And I will definitely tell some of my secrets right here on air for everybody to hear, that I intentionally create curriculum that would steer them in that direction. I intentionally and want to inspire them to believe that they can be that next change agent that will revolutionize our world as we know it. That's what I want them to know. And I also want the nation's kids, and I also want everyone listening and America in general to know that we need to do better. We need to do better. And we stand in solidarity with all of the lives that were recently lost this week. We stand in solidarity with those children and the teachers and the families. We need to do better. And we're not going to sit here and talk about it. LEC is not just going to talk about it. Mrs. G is not just going to talk about it, but we're going to be about it. And we're going to be about the work. And now it's getting even more personal. It was personal back there, but now it's on now. It's on. And we need to do better. And we have failed. We have failed. And we need to do better. And we will.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see if I could share screen. So,
And this video, I would like to dedicate to LEC, who has created community for Latinx educators like me. It's called Carta para Nosotros, a letter to us.
give me a thumbs up if you could hear sound. All right.
Once a single voice, now a chorus of brilliant estrellas shining in the universe, bring constellations of amor, sabiduría, esperanza y verdad. I have learned not to apologize for my passion, stem from my lived experiences of trauma and long suffering. There is poder increíble in our Latinx identity, hues of colors designed with complexities that will service the brown faces and spaces that embody nuestra comunidad. The intersection of contemplative mindfulness, the vitality of linguistic literacy that traces back our history, shall hold us, elevate us to dimensions of advocacy yet unseen. To feel the warmth of our Latinidad cascade from the backdrop of our stories, from the works of our hands to the rooms of our hearts. Nunca en mi vida have I felt such a collective belonging of like-minded that see the potential and the promise of our kids that have often been left on society's margins, but we see them, we hear them, and we will amplify the voices that they already have. Empowerment, grace, beauty, promise, declarations, proclamations, reverberations. Every revolution begins on the heels of resistance, answering to the sounds of angustia, reclaiming with fist de justicia. We are the ones we are waiting for. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Adelante con la lucha, juntos podemos.
Love it.
I definitely wanted to share that with LEC and with those who are listening who haven't heard that piece before. We are the ones we are waiting for. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Adelante con la lucha, juntos podemos.
Absolutely.
Together we can.
I love it. All right, Sofia, it is time. I'm going to put you backstage and let this be under that 60-minute mark so it can go live stream on Instagram. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining us. Thank you for sharing your leadership journey. Powerful, powerful story.
Thank you, Delia. Thank you, LEC.
All right, wait for me in the backstage. All right, LEC community, that was Sofia Gonzalez, educator and activist out of the Chicagoland area. We will see you hopefully tomorrow. I'm going to drop in the chat the link to tomorrow's event. Please join us. It is in person. It's called a Feel Good Friday. We look forward to hosting the community there. And we'll see you next week for Ask an Educator. If I don't see you tomorrow.